Joy Gray had a conversation recently with Ro Khanna. Now, they talked about different topics, but the one topic that I want to focus on is this need for some of these so-called progressives, so to speak, to feel that they need to endorse and support Joe Biden over someone like Marianne Williamson, who is running against Joe Biden, who agrees with them on issues like Medicare for all. Now, I, for one, am not a part of the two-party system. I'm a registered independent. I came from that Bernie movement, done with the Bernie movement, done with the squad. All of these people have failed me in my experience. They have just failed. They have not fought for us. Don't want to get into all of that, but if you've been with me for a while, you've heard the story before. But for those who do support that strategy, I think this brings up a good question. Why is that? If you really care about Medicare for all and you really want everyone to have health care in this country, why would you not endorse the candidate who is for Medicare for all? So that is one of the things that they're going to discuss in this interview that I found particularly interesting. And I think Ro Khanna really reveals himself here. So let's go ahead and get into that really quick before I forget, because I do. Go ahead and smash that like button, guys. That helps me with the algo. And let's go ahead and get into this discussion.
I mean, I think that's right, but that gets to the heart of the problem. How do you get these kinds of reforms? I felt as though part of why I wanted to support somebody like Bernie Sanders was because he was very clear-eyed about why it is that the system isn't working, why it is that government is not democratic, and had a number of reforms to try to get at the root of that. I don't feel that way about Joe Biden, and you mentioned Medicare for all, you mentioned all of these incredibly important policies were a part of that package. So it kind of raises the question, why has there been such a quick coalescence around the idea of supporting Joe Biden should he announce a run for re-election in 2024 among, in particular, progressives in the House? Pramila Jayapal, the Progressive Caucus, has very quickly said that they plan to endorse Joe Biden if he runs. Why not take a beat and see if there is a candidate that emerges that at very least is willing to commit to things like Medicare for all, unlike Joe Biden, who, as I'm sure you remember, said that he would veto Medicare for all even if it were able to pass the House and the Senate. Maybe it's someone like Marianne Williamson is obviously the only one who's thrown her hat in the ring thus far. She does support Medicare for all, a number of other Bernie-aligned policies, but it's still so early in the game. Why commit, I would argue, prematurely to voting and endorsing for Joe Biden?
So Bree kind of puts Ro Khanna in the hot seat here because he is one of those candidates that did support and endorse Bernie Sanders when Bernie ran. He is one of those politicians that said that, he supports Medicare for all. He considers himself to be a progressive. I interviewed Ro Khanna a couple of months ago, and many of you have reached out and said you should bring him back on. Some of you have reached out and said, don't ever bring him back on again. I really don't see the need to interview Ro Khanna again because I think he showed all of you who he really is. I think I asked him some really tough questions, and he made it very clear to me that he thought third parties was a problem, particularly Jill Stein. Now, he's saying something different today, but that's not what he said to me a couple months ago. He thought they were very problematic. He thought Jill Stein cost Hillary Clinton the election. All this, neoliberal talk that he presented when I spoke to him on this show. So for me, I was like, nope, don't need to bring him back on here. I already know. I know what you're about. I know what's happening here. I don't need to have another conversation with you. It's very clear. I don't feel like he's one of those people that can be moved on particular issues. There are people that I've spoken to that can. But she puts him in the hot seat. If you say that you're for Medicare for all, why would you endorse and support the presidential candidate who's against it instead of supporting the candidate who is for it? Now, listen to what Ro Khanna says, because this just cracks me up.
I said that the person I would support would be Bernie Sanders, but given that he has said that he's not running, I think that the president has done a lot of things that have been more progressive than I anticipated. I mean, the climate bill.
Okay, let's go back to what he just said, and then we'll go on. He just said, well, I would support Bernie Sanders, but Ro Khanna knows that Bernie Sanders is not running. He knows that Joe Biden, he's supposed to announce in April. He knows that Joe Biden is running. So to that point, why are you bringing up Bernie Sanders when you know that Bernie Sanders is not running? She just mentioned two people to you that are running, Joe Biden and Marianne Williamson. So if Marianne Williamson supports Medicare for all and Joe Biden doesn't, why are you bringing up Bernie Sanders? Let's go on. Now he brings up, well, Joe Biden's done some progressive things like the climate legislation. I just explained to you right before this news story what Joe Biden's doing right now in reference to the Willow Project, in reference to climate. So Joe Biden's continuing to destroy the climate. But Ro Khanna doesn't say this.
That he ended up passing, the sense that the Build Back Better, even though it didn't get passed for universal child care, $15 wage. So I think he has won confidence from a lot of progressives in adopting significant chunks of Elizabeth.
We did not get $15 minimum wage. Did you guys catch that one? We did not. Yes, Lucy, he's playing. We did not get $15 minimum wage. In fact, there was 7 Democrats who voted against it and 1 independent who voted against it. So I know, Eric, right? He slid that one in there. We did not get that.
Warren and Bernie Sanders his agenda. And I'm going to support him for re-election. That said, some of the attacks I've seen, at least online, on Marianne Williamson are totally beyond the pale. I mean, a democracy should have competition, and if someone wants to run on ideas, that's their right. I've said that about third-party candidates. I've said that about primaries in Congress. I've said that to people who run against me in primaries. I don't think you should squelch dissent or competition. I will make the case to the president, but if other people want to run and make the case for where the party should go, that's democracy.
Let me pause for a second. Notice he didn't answer the question. So the question that she asked him was, why not support the candidate that does support Medicare for all? Why are you so quick to endorse Joe Biden, who does not support Medicare for all? He didn't answer the question. He gave this roundabout response. Well, I supported Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders is not running. And he never answered the question as to why he is not willing to support the candidate that is running on Medicare for all against Joe Biden. Let's go on. That comment that he made about third-party candidates too, I'm going to look for that. I'm going to grab that video, that interview I did with him, because I'm going to show you what he said about third-party candidates.
So I would dispute the idea that there's a significant amount of progressive confidence in Joe Biden. We might be defining who's progressive wrong, or differently rather. But even if we put that to the side for a second, when I've asked you this question before, you've alluded to the things that Biden has done that have surprised you that are positive. And I have no interest in bickering over the significance of any given policy. Of course, any president is going to do some things that are positive. And given the very low bar that Joe Biden set as one of the most conservative politicians in the 2020 Democratic primary race, it certainly would be easy for him, in my view, to surpass expectations. However, that doesn't really get to the heart of the question, which is issues like Medicare for all, policies like Medicare for all were so central to what Bernie was fighting for and to what attracted 30% of Democrats to want to support him. So, is this kind of ephemeral notion that Biden has won the confidence of progressives more important than putting your voice behind policies that have the ability to so radically change the lives of millions of Americans?
So again, this is another way I think she's trying to help him a little bit and be like, look, you didn't answer the question. But again, she's asking, why aren't you putting your voice behind those policies? Because it's true. If you say that you're passionate about Medicare for all, but you're not willing to support the one candidate right now who is passionate about Medicare for all, and you still believe in this duopoly, I do not. But if you still believe in this duopoly, it does not make sense that you would still support Joe Biden. Because to me, that says you really don't see Medicare for all as an urgent issue. So it's not a sense of urgency for Ro Khanna, and that's a problem.
Well, I saw a poll the other day. I mean, polls are all over the place, though, that 18 to 34-year-olds, the vast majority, wanted him to run for re-election, which I attribute to both the student debt issue that we all fought for and climate that we all fought for. But absolutely, Medicare for all was a missed opportunity after the pandemic. I mean, we could have done simple things. We could have said we're going to raise Medicaid to cover up to 300% of poverty. That would have expanded coverage. I'm not saying even if you didn't go for all of Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all, which I support, we could.
But no one is asking you what you could have said or what you could have done. We all know what could have been done. The question is, why aren't you putting your voice behind those policies when it comes to endorsing and supporting the candidates that support that policy? No one's asking. Ro Khanna likes to do this. He likes to do this thing where he's like, well, you know, it's not as progressive as you or I would want it. I mean, aren't there other things we can do? Oh, absolutely. But, you know, there has been some progress. He says this in multiple interviews. It's a way for him to not really answer the question.
Have said we're going to have seniors get hearing, vision, dental. We could have extended Medicare to 60 or 55 as a step of going in the direction. We could have had more robust hearings on it. We could have had the president say aspirationally, I'm for Medicare for all. I've seen and changed my mind during the pandemic, and I understand why that's important. None of that has happened. And on healthcare, we have a tremendous amount of work to do. I guess my point is, I think the progressive movement pushing for Medicare for all will be better off in 2028 after 8 years of Joe Biden than if we have.
Back up the truck. I hope you heard that comment right there. Let's back it up a little bit. I told you it's not a sense of urgency. And he proves that. Listen.
I'm saying even if you didn't go for all of Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all, which I support, we could have said we're going to have seniors get hearing, vision, dental. We could have extended Medicare to 60 or 55 as a step of going in the direction. We could have had more robust hearings on it. We could have had the president say aspirationally, I'm for Medicare for all. I've seen and changed my mind during the pandemic, and I understand why that's important. None of that has happened. And on healthcare, we have a tremendous amount of work to do. I guess my point is, I think the progressive movement pushing for Medicare for all will be better off in 2028.
Will be better off in 2028. So Ro Khanna thinks that even though there's all these people out here that have died during the pandemic because of lack of insurance or no insurance, even though there are people out here who are struggling with medical debt, Ro Khanna thinks it's best to wait until 2028 to try to fight for it. It's 2023. That's 5 years from now. You see, this is what I've mentioned before. He does not see this as an urgent issue. He has good health insurance. Congressmen and women have great health insurance. Do you see the problem? You see why they don't talk about Medicare for all that much anymore? You notice how the squad don't talk about Medicare for all anymore? You notice that? Because they already got the memo. They already got the memo that, nope, let's not even try to mention this or push this until 2028. Could have been pushed during Force the Vote. Could have put pressure on Nancy Pelosi and everybody else in that house to pass Medicare for all. Could have been pushed then. They had opportunities. They had time. And listen, as much as Ro Khanna will come on to independent media outlets, Ro Khanna didn't force the vote. Ro Khanna didn't come to the Force the Vote town hall. It's not an urgent issue to him, you guys. He said it out loud.
After 8 years of Joe Biden, than if we have Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. Now, you may say that's a very pragmatic way of looking at it, and maybe it is. But I have not given up on the core principles that I'm very proud. I supported Bernie Sanders twice. I chaired his campaign. Obviously, that's what I believe is a just society. And the good news is there are more and more of us in the House who are ascribing to that platform.
I guess I wouldn't characterize it as, or my critique of that approach is not that it's too pragmatic. It's that it presumes that if a populist progressive candidate were elected in the Democratic primary in 2024, that it would lead to a Ron DeSantis or a Donald Trump being president. And I would say that 2028 looks a lot better if we had had 4 years of Joe Biden and then 4 years of a progressive that support Medicare for all, than 8 years of a president who is so aggressively against Medicare for all that he'd said he'd veto it, even if it were supported by all of Congress, and who took more money from the billionaire class in the pharmaceutical industry than anybody else did in the healthcare industry in 2020, which I think there's a direct relationship, to go back to our conversation before about the influence of lobbying. There's a direct relationship between that and his vehement opposition to the kind of healthcare reforms that most Americans want. I should also note, if we're talking about polls, that a February 6th poll showed that most Democrats, not to mention everybody else, don't want Joe Biden to seek a second term. So our progressives, our Democrats, especially progressive leaning ones, foregoing an opportunity here to capitalize on public sentiment, both against Joe Biden as a politician and for the policies that Joe Biden rejects, to try to run somebody in this moment.
Just want to pause here for a second, because I don't know where he got that poll from. I noticed it was a particular age group, but she's right. The majority of Democrats don't want Joe Biden to, according to the polls that I've seen. I don't know what poll he was looking at, but the polls that I've seen, the majority of Democrats do not want Joe Biden to run for a second term.
No, because I think to beat Trump or DeSantis, you're going to need someone with brand identification. I feel differently in 2028, but that's why I think Bernie has the brand, right? I mean, if Bernie were to say, "Look, I'm going to run, and I think I can win," that's why I said I would support Bernie Sanders. I'm not saying.
But Bernie said he's not going to run. Obviously, things change. But Bernie says he's not going to run, and the likelihood that he would run in 2028 is even more slim, I think, just generally speaking, given his age and whatnot. So apart from Bernie, unless you're able to name another Democrat, another progressive who you believe has name recognition, aren't we just punting down the line to being told in 2028 you're going to have to vote for some milquetoast neoliberal, maybe even Pete Buttigieg, because it's going to be Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis isn't going anywhere. He's a young man. Even if he loses, if he runs in 2024, and if he loses, he's still going to be there to take another bite at the apple down the line.
But the problem I think that we're going to run into is, even if you support the progressive candidate, like even if you support Marianne Williamson, we saw Bernie Sanders do this twice in a row. Even if you support Marianne Williamson and she loses, which I believe that she will, because I don't think the DNC is going to let her even have a chance of getting in there, especially if you're running on something like Medicare for all, then that progressive candidate in turn tells you to vote for the neoliberal candidate anyway. And that's the problem that I think I had with the progressive movement, is that they don't really fight and push back on the corporate Democrats like they're supposed to. In the end, they just tell you to support the same corruption and greed that they told you to fight against. And that's the problem that I have. And I think that's the thing. Like, if those people, if the squad members were to leave that party and sign up for a third party or start their own party, I think they'd be surprised by how much support they may have from their supporters. Like, I think a lot of people would follow them, because there are people I know that are AOC stans. So if AOC said, "I'm leaving the Democratic Party because both of these parties are corrupt and we can't get anything done in reference to progressive policies, who's coming with me? We'll organize on the outside and we'll organize on the inside. Who's coming with me?" I bet you thousands of people would sign up and follow her. That's the thing. So the progressives, like, they're still Democrats. They're still part of the same party that is corrupt. So they're still part of that same corruption. And that's the problem that we run into. And
I agree with that. I think a progressive could easily beat Ron DeSantis, and I think 2028 will be an open field, and I hope 3-4 progressives run, and I think they will win, because I think Bernie Sanders' agenda was popular, and if everyone had dropped out at the end and endorsed Biden, and if there wasn't the pandemic, and if it weren't for the fact that Biden was Obama's vice president, Bernie Sanders would have won that nomination. I mean, you and I were there. We did very well in Iowa, won New Hampshire, won Nevada. Nate Silver had the probability afterwards of Bernie Sanders winning at 70% for the nomination. So what the progressives need to be doing is not to forget how close Sanders came and realize that we're going to have a moment to build on that in 28. Look.
See, pay attention. He keeps talking about 2028. So I said this a while back. Don't be surprised if Ro Khanna runs in 2028. He already said he's not running in 2024. Don't be surprised if he runs for president in 2028. You see the little hints that he's throwing out? But the thing is this, like I said, the DNC is the problem. They're not going to allow, especially someone running on that Medicare for all rhetoric, they're not going to allow them to win. Yes, Bernie Sanders came very close. But look what happened. Based on the polls, Bernie Sanders should have outright won. But again, the DNC had its trickery. Barack Obama made a couple phone calls. That's how it works. Same thing, 2016. When you had Bernie Sanders win every county in West Virginia and the superdelegates decided to give the state to Hillary Clinton, they play tricks like that. Tricks like allowing people like Mike Bloomberg to join the debates late in the game, changing the rules so that he can join because he's corporate. Tricks like that. Making sure that people like Marianne Williamson and Andrew Yang, when they ran in 2020, don't have a voice by cutting off their mics when they're on the debate stage. They do little things like that. So this is why I say that entire system is corrupt. And until you change that system, people don't really get a fair chance. It was already decided, in my opinion, they had already decided who they wanted. And that's how it works, unfortunately.
The centrist wing of the party is often very strategic. Hillary Clinton, after she lost in 2008, bided her time and ran in 16 and won. And I think the progressive movement, if we lost in 20 and we build, can ensure that in 28, 32, 36, we have a progressive nominee. What does that mean? That means a nominee who will change back the Democratic platform of Medicare for all. I voted against the platform last time, to much criticism, but our platform used to have Medicare for all as part of it up till Ted Kennedy. I think it was changed in 1980. It means a president who's going to clearly be for free college. Yes,
he did. I'm glad you caught that, the Oracle. Did he really just say if all the other candidates didn't just drop out? You see the framing? You see the framing?
Free vocational education. It's going to be someone who's going to be for taxing the ultra wealthy, who's going to be clearly for a livable wage, and would say, I'll fire the parliamentarian if the parliamentarian gets in the way. I think those principles can be the table stakes for the nominee going forward.
So when he talks about firing the parliamentarian, George W. Bush, during his administration, they did that. They got rid of the parliament. The parliamentarian was getting in the way. So they were like, you got to go. We could do that too. Like that could be done right now. Joe Biden could do that right now if the parliamentarian was such a problem to the Democratic Party that they say it is. They don't see the parliamentarian as such a problem because the parliamentarian honestly is part of it. To me, it's just part of the process. It's part of how they want things to go. So they have someone to blame. It's like Glenn Greenwald says about the rotating villain. Like they can point to a parliamentarian. They can point to Joe Manchin. They can point to Kirsten Sinema, right? They can point to these people to say, we couldn't pass it because X, Y, and Z. And if you get rid of those people and you put in people that actually would pass those things, then they would not have an excuse. But those people would change their mind too, because again, they learn to work with the system that benefits their political careers. That's what happens.
What has been gained, Representative Khanna? What is gained? Because by you not endorsing a candidate that's like that now, or not articulating at very least that you're going to sit out of it because Biden does not rise to the level of those stated ideals or those policy objectives that are so core. And maybe you don't believe that, let's say, someone like Marianne Williamson has a viable chance of winning, but at least an acknowledgement that on paper, from a policy perspective, she checks off all the boxes of the policies that you just listed. Because what ends up happening, from my view, is that there is a
Notice Ro Khanna didn't mention any foreign policy positions. Ro Khanna talked about domestic policy. Notice he didn't mention foreign policy. I didn't hear anything about Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine, Syria, Yemen. We talked about the kids starving in Yemen today on RBN. You noticed that? Let's go on.
Diminished confidence in the progressives that are left because they refuse to distinguish themselves in meaningful ways from folks like Joe Biden. You can make criticisms of him all you want, but if at the end of the day, you're always endorsing him, focusing on the things that he's done good rather than all of the disappointments, not focusing on the things that he could do with his executive authority that he has refused to do, it diminishes the brand of what it even means to be a progressive. Not to mention, Representative Khanna, and I'd be remiss not to mention this, doing things like voting to condemn socialism, which was something that you voted for. I mean, how do you explain that kind of decision and expect progressives to still have confidence in this time down the lane in the future, 2028 or whenever it is, that someone like yourself or someone who has been framing themselves as a progressive is actually going to be progressive when it matters if you were not willing to vote against things like a ridiculous performative condemnation of socialism?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer both questions. First, on the question of supporting Joe Biden, I believe that the choice is between right now Biden and the Republican field, and that President Biden being there would help us make further progress on climate, on student loans, or on finally, hopefully, getting some increase in a livable wage, even if we don't get to $15. And I do think we would make that progress if we took back the House, and that's why I'm supporting him as the incumbent Democratic president. But where I am different than many other Democrats is I have always said respectful things about Marianne Williamson. I have said that I respect and admire a number of her positions. I've said that she should not be chased out of or bullied out of the race. And if she wants to raise progressive policies to help move the party in a progressive direction, to move the president in a progressive direction, fine, good. I mean, like, let's embrace conversation. And I think that's one difference. You say, what is the difference? It's that I do make room for both progressive critique and progressive candidacies, but I am going to support Joe Biden on Liz Sanders.
Like he tells on himself here. He really does tell on himself here. He's letting you know, yeah, I support all those things, but I am going to support Joe Biden. It does not make any sense. Ro just trying to keep his seat. See, Ro, no, they already had this conversation probably. Ro has probably already been told by people, listen, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Biden could have already said to him, you support me in 2024, I'll make sure I support you come 2028 if you run for president.
The idea that it's a Democratic primary, though, that I'm stuck with, because there's a lot of progressives who don't want to support Marianne Williamson for a number of issues, including her foreign policy positions, her position on Israel, Palestine, her position on the Ukraine war. And I completely understand that approach. But there's this kind of strategic question that I've been wrestling with, which is that in a Democratic primary, this is not a general election where I think that people should vote. But in a Democratic primary, if people were like, oh, Marianne Williamson, she's not going to win anyway, yada, yada. Okay. Well, when it comes down to Biden and DeSantis or Biden and Trump or Biden and Nikki Haley, you can still vote for Biden. What is gained by, and I ask this of a lot of progressives that listen to my show, and stuff, what is gained by either, kind of sitting out the primary or premature, I would argue, I'm trying not to, premature is obviously a value-laden word, but, before it is necessary to affect the general election outcome, endorse Joe Biden?
For me, what is gained by not participating in the primary is the fact that I'm not participating in supporting these two corporate parties. That's what it is for me. I'm putting my effort and energies into other projects like Workers Strike Back, into mutual aid, into direct action, things that I've actually seen help people in the community. That's what it is for me. And the reality is, for a lot of people who are solely focused on electoral politics through the national electoral politics, they get to a point where they believe that by voting, they are actually going to change people's lives. Like people's lives are going to change for the better. And during my lifetime, I have not seen that to be true. And I think the thing is, like I told you, these parties support corporate interests. They pass legislation that backs corporate interests. They rarely pass legislation that benefits the people that doesn't have some type of corporate interest attached to it unless they are pushed to do so. So for me, there's no reason for me to support or participate in the primary because I see it as though you're still a candidate running in a corporate system and you're still allowing yourself to go into those corporate parties. So for me, instead of spending my time and donating money, I will never donate money to these politicians again. Bernie Sanders owes me a huge refund. AOC owes me a refund. I would never give them money again. I would put my money into mutual aid efforts. I would put my money into something that's actually helping people in the community. The more time you're spending on supporting those candidates and giving money to those candidates, the less time you are spending supporting organizations like Workers Strike Back, which I was just at, by the way. This Saturday, I was just at the Boston launch. The less time you're focused on labor, supporting these labor movements, the less time you're focused on something like supporting worker co-ops, the less time you're focused on some type of mutual aid or direct action efforts. And that's the thing. The movements on the outside are strong when the people that are involved are fully invested in them. The movements on the outside are not strong when the people are not fully invested and the people still believe that there is a hero politically that is going to save them. So for me, it's a waste of my time to support anybody that's running those two-party systems, whether it's a primary or not. I just don't have time for it. Bernie owed me some money.
I think that President Biden has worked effectively to move progressive policy, and I'd like him to continue to do that as opposed to move to the moderate lane. I mean, his allies, more of us in the Progressive Caucus have defended him than moderates. I defended him on Afghanistan. He got a lot of criticism on that from the moderate wing. We defended him on going big on Build Back Better. We insisted that we do the Inflation Reduction Act for climate. He took our side on the student loan debate, not the moderate wing. So, I want him to continue to move in a progressive direction. And I believe he's been effective on a number of these policies, which is why I'm endorsing him. I mean, I went very early for Bernie Sanders. Now, are there areas where I policy-wise disagree with him? Yes, and I've been candid with that on Medicare for all, most probably on a $15 wage, on universal child care. What he's proposed isn't universal child care. I call for $10.
But see, this is what I was saying about Ro Khanna. This is what he does. Are there areas where I disagree with him? Absolutely. But you're still not supporting the people who agree with you on most of the policy. See, this is the thing. You're willing to support the person who you agree the least with instead of supporting the person you agree with the most. That's the part. That's the kicker right there. Ro trying to run
$1 a day childcare. And I'll continue to speak out about those policies. I think climate, we have to go much bigger. I'm on the Thrive Act, $1 trillion a year. We did $300 billion over 10 years. I'm for defense budget cuts, by the way. He's coming out with a defense budget that's almost going to be $890 billion.
Yes, so, after audits show that they can't find 30% of what they've been spending anyway.
So I think if people look at my record, they'll see that I took to the New York Times to criticize some of the approach on inflation. I have not shied away from being critical of the president where I disagree. But overall, I think it has been a successful presidency in the light of the circumstances. And I think we can get more progress to usher in a progressive era for 2028 with him there. And that's the.
See, notice he said 2028 again. He's giving you guys the cues. Ro Khanna letting you know, maybe I might be one of those people that run in 2028. He played two lanes. He played both sides for me. Like I said, I talked to him. I'll show you what he said to me about third parties. I talked to him. He said some things about third parties, about Jill Stein that I was not cool with. I don't think, like I said, even if I did invite him back, I don't think Ro Khanna will come back. I don't think so. But I'll go ahead and share it here. I just want to play that one piece where he talked about Jill Stein. That's towards the end. See, I remember where it's at because we got to that towards the end. And then he said he had to go. He got mad. Hold on. me see if this is the one. Who is not going to get us into these wars, and someone who really was going to get in there and fight. And Hillary Clinton was just going to be an extension of Barack Obama. And that's the one. That's the part. Okay. I went right to it. That's the part when we bring up Jill Stein. I think it's right here. Let me put up the captions. That'll help. Okay.
Union laws. It got us the Affordable Care Act. It stood up for women's rights. So I think that there's a lot that the Democratic Party has achieved. Now, we, in my view, ought to be making the Democratic Party a progressive party, a populist party, a party that's going to stand for bold policy. But it would be wrong to give up on a party that has achieved so much. Now, if there is an independent grassroots candidate who is standing for bold progressive policies, fine. But usually the independent third-party candidates tend to be billionaires or celebrities, and it's not clear to me that those policies that they're going to advocate are going to be Medicare for all or free public college or the progressive policies that many people, your listeners, care about.
He's a damn lie, because he knows damn well that Jill Stein also ran on those same policies. Do you see how but this, okay, let me go on. Let me show you what he says. Well, I happen to know one here locally pretty well who was grassroots third-party candidate, and that was Dr. Jill Stein. And when she ran, we were guilt-tripped to vote for Hillary Clinton. That if we didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, then Trump would win. But I still say to this day that Jill Stein was the better candidate.
Well, I supported Hillary Clinton in the general election, and I'm proud of supporting Hillary Clinton. I think that...
Pause. So you see what he did then is the same thing he's doing now. So him and Jill Stein agreed on most of the policies, most of the issues. They agreed on Medicare for all. They agreed on canceling student loan debt. And by the way, that came from Jill Stein, not from Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Jill Stein was the first person that I saw actually talk about canceling student loan debt. So let's just keep that in mind, keep that into perspective. But then he goes on to say, well, I supported Hillary Clinton. I stood by Hillary Clinton. So once again, that was Ro Khanna supporting someone who didn't agree with him on most of the policies instead of supporting the person who did agree with him on most of the policies. Now, one can argue he wanted to support the Democratic Party because he is a Democrat, and that's why he didn't support Jill Stein. But what's his excuse now? Because right now, I mean, Marianne Williamson is a Democrat, no? And Joe Biden is a Democrat. So what's his excuse now for supporting someone whose policies he don't align with, or most of the policies, instead of supporting the person that he does align with most of the policies?
Trump was such a threat to democracy and is such a threat to democracy. Look, if Hillary Clinton had won, we would not have had Roe versus Wade overturned. So I do not agree with people who supported Jill Stein, especially in swing states, because the costing of Hillary Clinton that election really led to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and the Supreme Court that we currently have.
Well, I would say that Hillary Clinton's campaign cost her the election herself. I feel like that was her doing. Ignoring the Rust Belt, I think, was a totally awful idea. You cannot avoid the Rust Belt. She should have learned that from Bill Clinton. He knew to campaign there. I would also add that having a running mate who was anti-choice, Tim Kaine was not pro-choice when it came to abortion, was also not a good idea. And I also think that Hillary Clinton did not talk to the everyday average person. She was talking at people instead of talking to them. And she's corporate. So for me, I was looking for someone who's grassroots, someone who actually cares about the people, someone who is not going to get us into these never-ending wars, and someone who really was going to get in there and fight. And Hillary Clinton was just going to be an extension of Barack Obama, and people wanted something different. So I don't blame someone like Jill Stein. I blame Barack Obama. I think he's the one that actually gave us Trump in the first place, because he made all these promises and he didn't fulfill them. Ro Khanna was willing to back the corporate candidate. And this is why I say, like, the whole like progressive movement, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. How you choose, make this make sense to me. How you go with Hillary?
I have a lot of admiration for President Obama. I think he had to overcome so much, especially as the first black president, and he had significant achievements with the Dodd-Frank bill, with rescuing us. People forget what the economy was like back in 2008, the hand he was dealt with getting the Affordable Care Act.
So anyway, you get the point. We ain't got to go through all of this. But the thing is this, at the end of the day, Ro Khanna also is backing the establishment candidate. I couldn't believe that. Like, try to use that line on me. I blame Jill Stein for the reason that Hillary Clinton lost. Who did he think he was talking to? I can't. So you guys see the point that I'm trying to make is that he's doing it again. He's doing the same thing. Watch him run in 2028. Watch. And he'll still tell you he's progressive and he supports Medicare for all. Give me a break. Give me a break. Thank you, Matthias. Again, with the voter shaming, these clowns will never learn. Right? I said Ro Con man for court jester. All right. It's Brent said that voice cracking says more than the BS. I don't know.